I'm Heather Thompson, 31 years old, a registered nurse who busted my back, saving every cent for 10 years to snag my first home. My family ties have been tight, yet twisted, especially with my sister who never nailed down accountability. When my parents dumped our childhood house out of nowhere, I was blindsided. But the stab came when they rolled up with bags barging in like owners demanding rooms. They handed her $222,000 for her flashy setup while expecting me to bail them out indefinitely, rearranging my space and inviting crowds without a word. Until what I did next left them reeling. Before getting to my story, I'd love to know what time you're listening and which city you're in. It's exciting to see how far these tales reach. Growing up in the suburbs outside Miami, our family of four looked ordinary on the outside. My parents, Cynthia and Gregory, held down steady jobs to keep us solidly middle-class. Dad as a bookkeeper for a local firm. Mom teaching kindergarten at the school down the road. We didn't have beach getaways or shiny cars, but the basics were always there. The difference between my sister Brittany and me showed up early. She's 2 years younger but got a free pass on everything. Skipped assignments, mom dropped them off at class. Ditched art lessons because they bored her dad, just suggested something new next season. But if I asked to skip volleyball for extra study time, I got a full talk on sticking it out. This carried into high school. Brittany scraped through graduation while I held a strong GPA juggling weekend shifts at a local cafe. When college rolled around, they questioned my nursing ambition. Why not easier? Mom pushed for something less stressful. Yet they covered Brittany's brief try at graphic design school, which she quit after a couple months, followed by a photography course that lasted even shorter. Each flop, they pulled her back home with open arms and her favorite meals. I pieced together nursing school with scholarships, loans, and overnight diner work. The exhaustion from classes and shifts was constant, but I powered through. Parents came to my graduation, but their praise seemed routine compared to their excitement when Brittany scored a part-time graphic job at 25 after drifting through entry-level spots. After that, I moved into a small rental and started in the ER at Coastal Hospital. Picking up extra hours helped knock down loans and build my house fund. Some months, $100, others up to $400 when I covered weekends. Brittany crashed back home yet again after getting let go from the graphic role. She showed off new gadgets, though, which parents highlighted whenever I voiced worry about her job situation. At least she's got tools for freelance pitches, Mom would say, overlooking that they co-signed for most of it. It took 7 years of cutting corners to gather enough for a down payment. By then, I'd upgraded to a one-bedroom rental, but kept life simple. Thrift store furniture, mostly home-cooked food. Every spare dollar funneled into the goal. When I started house hunting, I aimed for modest places in safe neighborhoods close to the hospital. The market was tough. I lost out on 2 bids before landing mine, a 3-bedroom with a small yard and real character. The day I got the keys felt huge, standing in the empty living room with sunlight pouring in, knowing every late shift and skipped treat led here. I spent the first few weeks painting walls and making small updates to claim the space. The first big buy was a table for 6 because family still counted for me despite the uneven past. I invited them over for Mom's classic roast chicken as a thank you gesture. Those Sunday dinners became a habit. Brittany would flake or show late, but parents rarely missed. During one, Dad seemed edgier than usual, constantly glancing at his phone and stepping out for calls. Mom dropped comments about how expensive utilities were getting these days. I asked straight if money was tight, but they waved it off with vague answers about retirement creeping up. Everyone stresses about that as they age, I told myself, pushing the concern aside. Yet the subtle shifts kept piling on Dad's jittery vibe, Mom's odd remarks. If I'd tuned in closer, I might have caught the storm building, but instead, the unease simmered just under the surface, hinting at something bigger they weren't sharing. As weeks passed, the patterns grew harder to ignore, stirring a gut feeling that my hard-earned sanctuary might not stay mine for long. The day I closed on my house was electric. After years of scraping by, I stood in my new 3-bedroom home in a quiet Miami suburb just a short commute from Coastal Hospital. The place wasn't huge, but it had charm, a small yard, big windows, and space for a future I'd built myself. Every double shift, every skipped coffee run, every birthday, where I chose practical over fun, had led to this. I dove into making it mine, painting walls in soft blues and setting up a cozy living area. The first big purchase was a solid dining table for six, a nod to keeping family close despite our rocky history. I invited Mom, Dad, and Brittany for Sunday dinner, roasting Mom's signature chicken to show gratitude even if it felt one-sided at times. Those dinners became routine, though Brittany often bailed or showed late. Mom and Dad came most weeks. But I started noticing cracks, Dad checking his phone obsessively, Mom muttering about tight budgets. When I asked if they were okay financially, they dodged with vague lines about getting older. The unease from those moments lingered, pushing me to keep an eye out. A few months in, I was settling into my rhythm, work, home, repeat. Then a call from Lorraine, Mom's old co-worker, now retired to Georgia, flipped everything. She mentioned the sale of my parents' house out of nowhere, saying she heard they were helping Brittany get settled. My stomach dropped. What did she mean, helping Brittany? I pressed Lorraine, who hesitated, assuming I knew. She said Mom hinted at a big financial boost for Brittany to finally stabilize. The call ended, but my mind raced. Their house, our family home for over 20 years, sold without a word to me. I needed numbers. I reached out to Vanessa, a friend who worked at my parents' bank. Without breaking rules, I asked hypothetically what a paid-off house in their neighborhood might fetch. She didn't pause. 222,000 to 240,000, depending on condition. The figure hit like a brick. Their place was clear of mortgages, and property values in our Miami suburb had climbed steadily. I drove to Brittany's cramped rental, where I found her packing for a move. She was all smiles, showing off new tech gear and talking about a sleek studio in a beachfront high-rise. I cut through her chatter, guessing at the amount, 222,000. Her face froze. Then she admitted Mom and Dad offered it for her fresh start. She didn't ask, she claimed, but she sure took it. When I pushed about their plans, she got cagey. They mentioned staying with you for a bit. She mumbled, avoiding my eyes. The betrayal sank in. They'd handed Brittany their entire safety net, left themselves exposed, and assumed I'd pick up the pieces without even a conversation. I headed straight to my parents' house, where a sold sign stood proud in the yard. They confirmed it, framing it as Brittany needing the chance after years of struggle. "What about your retirement?" I asked, voice tight. "We've got some left," Dad said, dodging details. When I brought up their next steps, they got shifty. Maybe rent, maybe figure it out later. Their guilty glances screamed the truth. They were banking on crashing at my place, no discussion needed. The hurt wasn't just the money to Brittany. It was the total disregard for me, my space, my life I'd fought to build. They saw my hard-earned home as their fallback, no questions asked. The next week, my doorbell rang early on a Saturday, just after a grueling night shift. I stumbled to the door, still in scrubs, expecting a delivery. Instead, Mom and Dad stood there with suitcases, their truck loaded with boxes, parked at the curb. "We closed early," Mom said, forcing a smile. "The movers will bring the rest soon." I froze, words stuck. They hadn't called, hadn't asked, just showed up, ready to take over. As they started hauling in bags, the reality hit hard. My sanctuary, the one I'd poured everything into, was about to be invaded, and I had no say in it. I stood frozen as Mom and Dad hauled suitcases into my foyer, their truck outside stuffed with boxes. No call, no heads up, just them assuming my home was theirs. Movers would arrive in hours, they said, with more. I mumbled something about not being ready, but Mom brushed it off, temporary. She claimed, though, the pile of stuff screamed otherwise. By noon, my carefully curated space was unrecognizable. The guest room became their storage hub, packed with clothes and knickknacks. Mom took over my home office for her sewing gear, shoving my work files into a corner. Dad's bulky recliner landed in the living room, blocking my view of the TV. In the kitchen, Mom reorganized my cabinets without asking, tossing my meal prep containers to make room for her spices. "Your setup makes no sense, Heather," she said, rearranging my pots. I bit back frustration, telling myself it was just for a few days. But weeks passed, and they dug in deeper. Dad blasted morning news at 6, knowing I worked late shifts. Mom replaced my healthy salads with heavy casseroles, dismissing my diet as too strict. When I asked about their apartment hunt, Dad shrugged. "Market's tight right now." Their takeover grew bolder. Mom shifted my furniture while I was at work, claiming better flow. Dad invited his buddies over for game nights, leaving snack crumbs and soda cans scattered. I tried setting rules. "Please ask before changing things," but Mom laughed it off. "We raised you in our house for years, Heather. Can't you share a bit?" The strain hit my work. After a 12-hour shift, I came home to chaos, not calm. My focus slipped, and I nearly mischarted a patient's meds, thankfully caught by a colleague. My supervisor, noticing my distraction, pulled me aside. "Everything okay at home?" I dodged with vague family stuff, but the stress was eating me. Then came the family brunch unannounced. I walked in after a night shift to find Mrs. Gladys Henderson, a church friend of Mom's, hosting aunts and cousins in my living room. My dishes were out, my coffee table stained with drink rings. Mrs. Henderson, all smiles, spread whispers that I was ungrateful for not welcoming my parents' stay. Mom beamed, calling my house perfect for us all. I slipped upstairs, heart pounding, feeling my space stolen. Worse came after a brutal shift where I lost a patient. All I wanted was a quiet bath to process. Instead, I found Mrs. Henderson's church group in my home, a potluck dinner with strangers sprawled across my couch. Mom waved me over to meet their pastor, ignoring my exhaustion. Upstairs, my bedroom, my one off-limit spot, had been touched. My dresser was rearranged. My comforter swapped for some old family quilt. "Just sprucing it up," Mom said when I confronted her. "You're too sensitive about your space." The real blow landed when Mom and Dad started meddling with my relationship. I'd been dating Derek for a year. He was steady, my moral anchor, always urging me to stay calm amid the chaos. But Mom kept pushing me toward a church friend's son, saying Derek wasn't serious enough. They even invited the guy over for dinner without telling me. Derek's family started questioning my drama girlfriend status, piling on pressure. It broke us. Derek walked away, saying he couldn't handle the mess. I was gutted, but Mom just shrugged. "You'll find better," she said. Brooke, my coworker at the hospital, had been my sounding board. At first, she was all in. "Girl, get your house back," she'd say after hearing about the invasions. But as I vented more planning ways to push back, she started pulling away. "You're getting obsessed, Heather," she warned after I missed a shift detail from stress. "This isn't healthy anymore." Her words stung, but I couldn't stop. These were my boundaries being crushed. Then one evening, after another long shift, I tried logging into my work email to check schedules. Password failed. Tried again, locked out. My heart sank as I realized Mom had accessed it, claiming she was helping organize my shifts. She'd even replied to my supervisor about picking up extra hours without asking me. The violation hit like a wave, my career, my sanctuary, my life all overrun. I knew then I couldn't let this slide any longer. The email hack was the final straw. My career, my sanctuary, my boundaries, all trampled. I couldn't let my parents and Brittany keep running over my life. I needed a plan, and fast, to take back control. First, I reached out to Travis, Brittany's ex-boyfriend, now a successful tech entrepreneur. I'd connected with him after learning about the house sale, hoping for clarity. Over coffee, he confirmed Brittany had blown most of the $222,000 on a luxury beachfront studio and art investments that were already tanking. He pulled up bank records he'd accessed legally from a shared account they'd once had, showing transfers from my parents' sale straight to her. The numbers made my blood boil, proof of their favoritism in black and white. Travis offered to share the evidence if I needed it, and I knew it'd hit Brittany hard, exposing her wastefulness. Next, I called Paige, a friend from nursing school turned property lawyer. She laid it out clearly as the sole homeowner I could demand they leave immediately since they had no lease. But if they resisted, formal eviction could drag on and torch family ties. I didn't want sheriffs involved, but I needed leverage. Paige suggested documenting every overstep and getting a mediator to set terms. I also booked an urgent session with Dr. Harlan, my therapist. I'd seen him occasionally to cope with stress, but now it was personal. He revealed a bombshell he'd counseled Mom years ago when Brittany was spiraling after dropping out. Mom had admitted favoring Brittany because she felt guilty about her struggles, believing I was strong enough to handle myself. The revelation stung, explaining their bias, but not excusing it. Dr. Harlan urged me to practice firm boundaries, warning that guilt would hit hard but wasn't my burden. Meanwhile, my cousin Lindsay reached out after hearing Mrs. Gladys Henderson's church gossip about my supposed ungratefulness. Over lunch, Lindsay dropped her own secret she'd been sidelined years ago when my parents loaned Brittany money for a failed art show while ignoring Lindsay's plea for college help. Her story mirrored mine, fueling my resolve. Lindsay promised to back me up, ready to call out the favoritism in front of the family. Brooke, my coworker, was another story. She'd been my cheerleader, pushed them out, she'd said, but now she was pulling back. After the email hack, I told her my plan to confront everyone, and she got uneasy. "You're letting this take over, Heather," she said, pointing out my recent shift errors from stress. "If you keep pushing, you'll lose more than your house, maybe even us as friends." Her ultimatum shook me, but I couldn't back down. I drafted a formal notice with Paige's help, 30 days to move out, plus a list of senior housing options, and an offer to cover their first 3 months' rent. I scheduled a family meeting inviting Brittany and hiring Carla Reeves, a professional mediator with years of experience, to keep things on track. The night before, I barely slept, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios, family turning on me, becoming the villain. But I steeled myself. This was my home, earned through years of grind. Sunday morning, Carla arrived early, setting up chairs in a circle to level the dynamic. Mom and Dad walked in, wary, eyeing the stranger. Brittany strolled in late, casual as ever, sipping a coffee like it was just another day. Carla laid out the rules: each person speaks without interruption. No attacks, focus on solutions. I went first, voice steady despite nerves. "6 weeks ago, you moved in without asking. I started looking at Mom and Dad. You've rearranged my home-hosted events with Mrs. Henderson, spreading rumors, hacked my email, and crossed every boundary. I feel disrespected in the space I worked so hard for." I turned to Brittany, pulling out Travis's evidence. "You took $222,000 from the house sale, knowing it left them with nothing. They plan to stay here permanently without my consent. I'm done being the safety net." Mom tried to cut in, but Carla held firm. Dad spoke next. Defensive. "We raised you, gave everything. Is it wrong to expect help?" Mom added. "We cook, clean, fix things, aren't we contributing?" I countered. "I'm grateful for my upbringing, but that doesn't give you rights to my home. You chose to give Brittany your savings without asking me, and now I'm carrying the consequences." Brittany shrugged. "They offered the money, I didn't force them." Carla pressed their intentions, and the truth spilled. Mom and Dad had always planned to live with me, thinking my 3-bedroom house was too big for one person. They'd drained most of their accounts for Brittany, not just the house money, leaving barely enough for basics. Lindsay spoke up, voice sharp. "You did the same to me, helped Brittany while I got nothing for school." The room tensed, their favoritism laid bare. Brooke, who I'd invited for support, shook her head. "This is too much, Heather. You're tearing them apart." She walked out, her ultimatum final. Carla steered us to solutions. I presented the notice: 30 days to move Brittany, to contribute $1,000 monthly for a year. I'd help with moving costs. Dad exploded, calling it an eviction. Mom cried, accusing me of heartlessness. Brittany just watched silent. After hours, we reached a tense deal they'd leave in 30 days. Brittany would pay, I'd assist. But as they left, Mom's teary glance and Dad's mutter about checking with Mrs. Henderson felt off. They weren't done pushing, and I sensed their manipulation wasn't over yet. The family meeting ended with a fragile agreement. Mom and Dad would move out within 30 days. Brittany would pitch in $1,000 monthly for their rent for a year, and I'd cover moving costs and the initial deposit. But the air stayed thick with tension. Mom's teary eyes and Dad's grumble about checking with Mrs. Gladys Henderson hinted they weren't ready to let go. I braced myself, knowing their pushback was far from over. The next few weeks were a tightrope walk. I threw myself into helping them find a place, scouring listings for senior apartments in Miami's suburbs that fit their slim budget. Brittany, to my surprise, set up the promised transfers, though she barely spoke to me. I found a clean, modest 2-bedroom unit 20 minutes from my house. Nothing fancy, but safe and functional, with income-based rent they could manage with Brittany's help and their small savings. I paid the deposit and first 3 months hoping it'd ease the transition. But their manipulation didn't stop. Mom cycled between cold silence and tearful calls, recounting childhood memories to guilt me. "Remember when we took you to the beach?" Heather. Dad swung from distant to accusatory muttering. I was shoving them out like strangers. Mrs. Henderson amped up the pressure, spreading church gossip that I was abandoning my elderly parents. She even showed up uninvited one evening, preaching about family duty while eyeing my living room like it was hers to judge. I held firm, repeating that this was about boundaries, not rejection. Moving day came on day 29. I helped load their boxes into a rented truck. My stomach knotted as Mom hugged me stiffly. "This feels like you're done with us," she said, voice low. I met her gaze. "I'm not abandoning you. I've set you up with a home and support. But I need my life back." Dad just shook his head, climbing into the truck without a word. The first week after they left, I thought the worst was past. My house felt like mine again. Guest room, cleared office, restored for work, kitchen, back to my meal prep. I could breathe. But then the calls started. Mom left voicemails, her tone shifting from pleading to sharp, claiming I'd humiliated them in front of the church. Dad texted about needing more money for unexpected fees, framing it as my fault for rushing them out. Mrs. Henderson's rumors spread wider. Relatives messaged, some siding with my parents, others unsure but urging me to make peace. Brittany sent a message too defensive as ever. "You made this harder than it needed to be, Heather. They just wanted to be close." I stared at the words, her denial of responsibility reigniting my anger. She'd taken their money, lived large, and still saw me as the problem. I sat in my quiet living room, the weight of their tactics pressing down. Every call, every rumor felt like a hook trying to pull me back into their chaos. I'd given them a fair out housing, financial help, a clear timeline, but they kept twisting the narrative, painting me as the villain. It was a pattern I'd seen my whole life. Brittany got the free pass, I got the burden, and now they expected me to carry their guilt too. That night, I made a choice. I couldn't keep living on their terms, tiptoeing around their feelings while my peace crumbled. I called Paige for one last check. She confirmed I'd done more than enough legally and morally. Dr. Harlan's words echoed, "Boundaries aren't betrayal, they're survival." I opened my phone, blocked Mom, Dad, and Brittany's numbers, and sent a group message to relatives explaining briefly, "I've helped my parents find a home, but I need space from this cycle. Please respect my decision." Mrs. Henderson tried one last time, showing up with a church flyer for a family reconciliation event. I met her at the door, calm but firm. "This is my home, and I decide who enters." She left flustered, and I blocked her too. The silence that followed was heavy but freeing. My office was my workspace again, my guest room ready for friends who respected me, my living room arranged to my taste. I walked through my house, the quiet no longer feeling like a void, but a space I'd reclaimed. This journey taught me a hard truth. Family doesn't get a free pass to erase your boundaries. I used to think love meant sacrificing my needs, letting mom, dad, and Brittany walk over my life because we shared blood. But that's a trap. Manipulation and jealousy can hide behind family ties, draining your mental health. Setting boundaries. Even cutting contact isn't selfish, it's protecting your peace. If you see those red flags, guilt trips, favoritism oversteps, draw the line early. It's not easy, but it's worth it to live free. I'm grateful you've listened to my story. If it resonates, share your own boundary struggles in the comments. Hit like if you think I made the right call, and subscribe for more stories about navigating family chaos. As I settled into my reclaimed home, I wondered if they'd ever see my side. But for the first time, that question didn't own me. I was finally free to live my life my way.